Hello and welcome, everybody. Thanks for your patience. We're now ready to begin today's webinar, Individual Freedom in the Workplace, Freedom-Based Management Models. My name is Bethany Dennis. I'm with the Rutgers, New Jersey, New York Center for Employee Ownership, and I'll be your host and moderator. Next slide, there we go. Today's webinar will discuss how an organization can create and adopt a management approach that emphasizes liberating servant leadership. Using specific company examples, including his own experience at Exxon, Bill Nobles will discuss how leaders can coach and serve employees to produce extraordinary business results. The webinar is scheduled for 30 minutes with question and answer at the end. Participants are muted, so please submit any questions you have via the GoToWebinar questions box at any time. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the presentation will be sent to your email. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Bill Nobles is an executive fellow at Rutgers School of Management and Labor Relations. His 32-year career with Exxon Corporation ended as CEO of Exxon Central Services, a 600-person internal services company with annual revenues of $100 million, where the people-oriented culture he created produced step-change improvements in cost effectiveness, customer satisfaction, and employee satisfaction. That experience motivated the book Bill published with Paul Staley, Questioning Corporate Hierarchy, which describes how leaders can capitalize on freedom's powerful influences on human behavior and development to produce extraordinary business results. Bill, over to you.
Good afternoon. I want to thank Rutgers and Professor Therese for this chance to talk with you about freedom in the workplace, a subject that changed my life 25 years ago. Before getting to the details, however, I need to set the stage. 60 years ago, Douglas McGregor identified two fundamentally different management mindsets about people. Theory X managers saw people as a cost that needed to be controlled, while Theory Y managers saw people as their organization's most valuable resource. If anybody in the audience shares the Theory X view, I suggest leaving now because my comments are designed to help Theory Y managers take maximum advantage of their people's potential value. I'd like to start with some history about hierarchical control and the confusing path that I've taken to discovering the practicality and power of freedom in the workplace. Looking back, hierarchical control has been central to management since the Industrial Revolution. Control of cost, prices, assets, and not least, people. In fact, the sense of being in control has comforted managers for decades, with many feeling like that is what managers should be doing: setting targets, monitoring adherence, directing, and controlling. However, experts recognized long ago that hierarchical control also has a downside, negatively impacting employee performance. One CEO commented a century ago that if you put fences around people, you get sheep. Give people the space they need to contribute and grow. But attempts to address this problem have failed repeatedly, mainly because nobody has offered a practical alternative to hierarchical control. It turns out that Douglas McGregor actually offered half of the practical alternative 60 years ago with his exciting Theory Y. In a nutshell, McGregor argued that people don't hate work. Under proper conditions, work can be as natural as rest or play. He also noted that employees don't have to be forced. If they can commit themselves to mutual objectives, they will drive themselves more effectively than managers can ever drive them. But, and this is the key point, employees will commit only to the extent that they see ways to satisfy their personal ego and development needs. Exxon introduced me to Theory Y in my first supervisory training, and I got excited about taking advantage of my employees' potential. Unfortunately, though, like so many others, I did not recognize that the personal development required to earn employees' commitment also requires the freedom to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. And Exxon's hierarchical control system certainly provided none of that freedom. So Theory Y fell by the wayside for me and for mainstream management as hierarchical control has continued to dominate management theory and practices. Only recently have we discovered the other half of this practical alternative, freedom in the workplace. In my final Exxon job, the CEO asked me to form and lead an internal services company with 600 employees, $100 billion annual budget, and the freedom to create my own company culture. I had read that employees rarely treat customers any better than management treats them. So my leadership team set out to build a people-oriented culture using Theory Y as our guidance. That company operated for only 5 years before being shut down by a corporate reorganization, but the results were extraordinary. We reduced services costs by 30%, dramatically improved customer satisfaction, and most impressively, revolutionized employee satisfaction and growth on the job. In fact, the results were so dramatic and unexplainable that after retiring early, I connected with another CEO, Paul Staley, who had a similar unexplainable experience with changing the culture of a chemical company. And we spent a decade trying to figure out what the devil had we done and why had it produced such results. During that research, Paul asked the key question: does management have any fundamental reason to control employees? And our 10 years of research could find no basic reason for management to control people, and instead revealed that our culture changes had actually stumbled upon the powers of freedom in the workplace. Later, we also found that 17 other CEOs had similar trial and error experiences moving their companies toward freedom. Examining all of those experiences revealed 3 elements that we use to build freedom-oriented organizations. First, we shared company objectives that were mutually attractive to employees and the business. Second, we strive to satisfy employee ego and self-development needs. And third, we transformed our manager roles into what I call liberating servant leaders. Now, I would like to expand briefly on each of these elements. We all used a compelling vision of organizational success as the foundation for articulating mutually attractive objectives. Herb Kelleher, founder of Southwest Airlines, provided a great example of this, stating that his company was dedicated to the highest quality of customer service, delivered with a sense of warmth, friendliness, individual pride, and company spirit. Kelleher also aspired to provide his employees the same concern, respect, and caring attitude within the organization that they were expected to show externally to Southwest customers. Second, we shared with employees the rewards of business success through profit sharing and encouraging stock ownership. And finally, we encouraged all employees to think and act like owners by opening financial records, educating everybody in some basic accounting techniques, and most importantly, by emphasizing how business success provides the only real job security. Actions like these earn strong commitment to business success in all of these freedom-oriented companies. To satisfy employee ego and development needs, each of these CEOs practiced what we call leadership without ego, usually without realizing it. In simple terms, this meant using leadership power to address the needs of employees rather than to selfishly inflate egos as so many CEOs do today. Next, the CEOs emphasized freedom, in particular, making sure that everybody had sufficient authority to freely accomplish their daily responsibilities without asking for supervisory approval. Third, we emphasize values like self-responsibility, accountability, and free flow of information. Finally, every employee was encouraged to fully develop and utilize their potential. This included special attention to learning from mistakes and failure, which is a natural part of the human growth process, but ignored by most companies today. The third thing we did was to transform our traditional manager roles into what I call liberating servant leaders. These leaders were responsible for serving their colleagues in two key ways. First, they ensured that everybody understood the vision for success and how their personal responsibilities supported that. And then second, they made sure everybody had everything needed to freely fulfill their responsibilities, to develop their potential, and to take full advantage of their growing capabilities. Equally important, these liberating servant leaders had no control responsibilities. In fact, in an ideal freedom-oriented organization, there is no external control over employees. Now, what did these radical changes accomplish? The results were just as McGregor had predicted 60 years ago. Freedom motivated our employees to drive themselves toward achieving company success far more effectively than managers could ever drive them. Freedom also revolutionized individual effectiveness. My employees grew to take on amazing new responsibilities and, in fact, behave like creative entrepreneurs focused on the success of our company. In fact, one actually transformed a cost center into a profit maker. Finally, freedom transformed organizational effectiveness in many ways. One was taking better use of frontline employee knowledge of customers, competitors, and the marketplace, which can be invaluable in today's rapidly changing world. Another was employees creatively identifying and solving organizational problems. Every one of these CEOs was convinced that freedom in the workplace played a critical role in their extraordinary company successes. And that success was truly extraordinary. The 5 freedom-oriented companies researched for my book outperformed the S&P 500 for 30 years each by factors ranging from 3 to 10 in 5 different industries. I'd like to close now with a few suggestions on how to get started with freedom if you're interested in doing that. First, it's essential to recognize that freedom starts in the CEO's mind. He or she must believe that employees have great potential value to the organization because that provides the motivation for change. And then second, she or he must be open to the possibility that employees need not be controlled because that opens the way for experimenting with freedom. Leaders of small to mid-sized companies can use a three-step process to evolve toward freedom. First, you can shift your personal emphasis and that of your managers and supervisors to leading, coaching, and serving rather than managing and controlling people. Second, you can create employee ownership mentalities by sharing profits, teaching fundamentals of profit and loss, and opening your financial books. And finally, you can emphasize individual development, increase the responsibilities and accountabilities of your employees, and encourage their involvement in problem solving and learning from mistakes. There are 2 books that provide additional details of these freedom-oriented experiences. My book is called Questioning Corporate Hierarchy, and there's another book, Freedom Incorporated, written by a Wall Street Journal editor and a French business school professor. I very much appreciate this chance to discuss this exciting issue with you, and now we'll be happy to discuss your questions, or later if anybody would like to have additional questions, feel free to email me at billnobles@optonline.net. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. So we're now at the question and answer portion of the webinar. Please type in your questions in the question box, but right now I'm going to ask a frequently asked question that I know that you often get is, if the freedom model is so practical and powerful, why isn't it spreading across the country?
That's a good question, and it is not spreading in this country. We found really only one professor researching freedom. That's the fellow up at Harvard. But the interesting thing is that in France, it is spreading across industry very rapidly over there. The French business school professor has 15 different company initiatives that he is pursuing. So I think in this country, there are 2 basic reasons. One is that freedom is a complex issue for management to get its head around. It can be scary. It also involves what I call a paradigm shift. Unfortunately, the most of the CEOs that we found who were freedom oriented are also dead now, and so that we can't offer actual freedom oriented CEOs out there talking about it today.
All right, thank you so much, Bill. Question 2, how do you implement freedom-based management in a strict regulatory environment?
I'm sorry, repeat?
Sure. How do you implement freedom-based management in a strict regulatory environment?
Well, the regulations are externally imposed on the company. I assume that's what you're talking about. And so part of the company's success is meeting those regulations. You can internally then implement freedom within the enterprise with that as one of the requirements, satisfying the business regulations as one of the requirements.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Looks like nobody has any other questions, so that was our last question. If anyone has any follow-up questions, our contact information is on the final slide. Please reach out and we'll get back to you. And also Bill mentioned his email as well. All right, so our next webinar will be October 23rd It'll be on employee ownership for business succession. Please save the date. We'll be sending out a reminder for that. And then I also wanted to remind you about our upcoming employee stock ownership plans and equity compensation conference, which will be on October 29th at the Heldrich Hotel in New Brunswick. We would like to invite all webinar participants to attend at cost for this event. If you are interested, please email me and I will send you the registration link. So this concludes today's webinar. As I mentioned earlier, a link to the recording of this presentation will be emailed to you. For more information on the New Jersey-New York Center for Employee Ownership, please visit our website, ownership.rutgers.edu. Thank you, Bill, for presenting, and thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it.